I walked into the Costco off Sterling Boulevard on a Tuesday morning in late October. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind of silence you get when a store is empty. The opposite. The lot was full, the carts were moving, but nobody was talking. Heads down, phones tucked away, a woman in front of me had 3 flats of bottled water stacked on her cart and 2 more on the dolly behind her. She was not making eye contact with anyone. I have shopped at Costco for almost 15 years. I know what the room feels like when people are stocking up for a weekend barbecue. This was not that. I want to tell you what I have been watching for the last several months. I think you deserve to see it laid out the way I have been laying it out in my own notebook. Not in headlines, not in hot takes, just in the slow accumulation of small things that, when you stack them next to each other, start to draw a line. There are 12 items I've been tracking inside Costco specifically, 12 items that are either thinning on the shelf, climbing on the price tag, shrinking in the package, or quietly disappearing without an announcement. And the 12th one, the last one I am going to walk you through, is the one that changed how I read the entire pattern. It is not the obvious item. It is not rice. It is not beans. It is something you have probably walked past 100 times without looking at it twice. I will get there. For a long time, I told myself the same thing you have probably told yourself. Supply chains wobble. Prices rise. Stores rotate inventory. None of it means anything on its own. But there is a moment, and I think a lot of you have already had this moment too, when the pattern stops being noise and starts being signal. For me, it was a Sunday in August, standing in front of a shelf that used to hold 3 0-pound bags of jasmine rice and finding it bare with a hand-printed sign taped to the wood that said "to per member, restock unknown." That was the moment I started writing things down. What you are about to hear is the result. Number 1, the first item is rice, specifically the long grain and jasmine varieties that Costco moves by the pallet. I started checking the prices in March. A 5 0-pound bag of jasmine I had been buying for around $32 was sitting at $41 by early summer. By September, the same bag in some warehouses was retagged at $47.99. That is roughly a 50% move inside 6 months on a staple commodity. The USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service has been publishing reports all year about India's export restrictions on non-basmati rice, restrictions that started tightening in 2023 and have not loosened. India supplies roughly 40% of the world's rice trade. When that tap narrows, every importer in the world bids on what is left. The United States, which imports a meaningful share of its jasmine and basmati, pays the price difference. The growers in Arkansas and Louisiana cannot fill the gap fast enough. Long grain American rice is a different product and a different planting cycle. So you put one bag in your cart and you do not think twice. But the broker who supplies that warehouse is already wondering what the spring contract is going to look like. Buy 2 bags now if you eat rice. Store them in food-grade buckets with oxygen absorbers. White rice will hold its quality for 25 to 30 years, according to Brigham Young University's food storage research. That is not preparedness. That is just arithmetic. But here's what concerned me more. Number 2, the second item is coffee. The whole bean Kirkland Signature Dark Roast, the 3-pound bag, has been my benchmark for years. I watched it move from around $13 to almost $20 over the past 18 months. The International Coffee Organization has documented Arabica prices hitting 4 7-year highs in 2024 and again in 2025. Brazil's drought, Vietnam's harvest shortfall, and the European Union's deforestation regulation have together rewritten the math. The EU regulation took effect at the end of 2024. Every bag of coffee that lands in an American port reflects this new math. Brokers who move green coffee out of Santos have publicly said they are now quoting prices weekly instead of quarterly. The market refuses to settle. If you drink coffee every day, that bag is not coming back down. Buy 2 now. Store them sealed in the freezer, where whole beans hold flavor for up to 1 year. Accept that the coffee shelf at your warehouse is going to keep climbing, which is when I started looking at olive oil. Number 3, the third item is extra virgin olive oil. The 2-liter Kirkland bottle from Italy was $11 not that long ago. I paid $22 for it in September. The International Olive Council has reported that Spain, which produces nearly half of the world's olive oil, has been hit with consecutive drought years. Production cut by more than half from peak levels. Italian and Greek harvests have not made up the deficit. What you are seeing on the Costco shelf is the front edge of a multi-year supply shortfall and a product that does not have a quick substitute. Olive oil keeps for about 18 to 24 months in a cool, dark place. Buy what you will use in 1 year. Do not panic. Just do not pretend the price is going back to where it was. And pay attention to what is happening to the bottle itself. The 2 liter is being quietly replaced in some warehouses with a 1.5 liter at a similar price. The shrinkflation is in the packaging, not on the tag. Mainstream food coverage does not lead with this because supermarket chains are major advertisers across cable and print. A slow-moving price story does not move ratings the way a single bad weather event does. The story is structural, and structural stories do not trend. Number 4. The 4th item is eggs. I do not need to tell you what has happened to eggs. The USDA and the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service have documented avian influenza cullings. More than 100 million birds across the laying flock over the past 2 years. What I want you to notice instead is the 1/8 pack at Costco. The price has more than doubled in some regions. The per member limit has come and gone and come back again depending on the warehouse. Eggs do not store the way rice does. But powdered whole eggs, the kind sold in number 10 cans by long-term storage suppliers. Increasingly available at Costco's online warehouse, hold for 5 to 10 years sealed, one can replaces roughly 72 fresh eggs. If you bake, if you cook breakfast, if you have grandkids in the house on weekends, 1 or 2 cans in a pantry corner is not extreme. It is a hedge. And that pointed me to something I did not expect. Number 5, the 5th item is butter. Specifically the 4-pound Kirkland Signature Unsalted Butter Pack. I watched it move from around $11 to over $20 inside the same 1-8-month window. The USDA's Dairy Market News tracks butter inventories in cold storage. Those inventories have been running below 5-year averages for most of 2024 and 2025. Dairy farmers across Wisconsin and California have been reporting cold herds, higher feed costs, and consolidating processors. The European butter market, which used to act as a release valve, is now competing with American buyers. EU stocks have also drawn down. Butter freezes for up to 1 year without quality loss. Buy 4 pounds, freeze 3, use 1. That is the entire instruction. Number 6, the 6th item is canned tuna and canned salmon. The Kirkland albacore and water, the case of 8, used to sit just under $15. I have watched it climb past $20. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has documented shifting migration patterns and tighter quotas across Pacific tuna fisheries. The Alaska salmon harvest in 2024 came in well below forecast. Long-haul truckers who haul refrigerated seafood out of Seattle have publicly described thinner loads and longer waits at the processing plants. Canned fish, properly stored in a cool pantry, holds quality for 3 to 5 years and remains safe well past that. 2 cases now is not hoarding. It is a protein reserve at a price that is not coming back. Number 7, the 7th item is canned tomatoes and tomato paste. The Kirkland organic diced tomato case has moved up steadily, and the reason is California. The University of California's Agricultural Extension Service has been publishing data on processing tomato yields. The combination of water restrictions in the Central Valley, labor shortages, and a difficult 2024 growing season has tightened supply. Italy, the other major source, has had its own drought story. Tomato paste in particular is a quiet foundation of American cooking. 6 cans of paste and 1 case of diced will carry a household through a winter of soups, stews, and sauces. They hold for 2 years on the shelf without thinking about it. Number 8, the 8th item is flour, specifically the 5 0-pound bags of all-purpose and bread flour that Costco's business centers carry. The Kansas wheat harvest in 2024 was the smallest in decades, according to the Kansas Wheat Commission. Drought across the Great Plains has reduced winter wheat acreage and yield. Flour prices at the wholesale level have moved, but the retail prices lagged because millers have been working through older contracts. That lag is closing. Store flour in food-grade buckets with bay leaves and oxygen absorbers. All-purpose flour holds for 1 to 2 years comfortably, longer if you can keep it cold. If you bake, this is the moment to lock in your supply. I want to pause here because I think the pattern needs to be named directly before I walk you through the rest. What you are looking at is not a single shortage. It is the convergence of 4 separate pressures hitting the American grocery shelf at the same time. Climate disruption is reducing yields across staple crops on 3 continents. Geopolitical friction, from the Black Sea to the South China Sea to the Suez, is rerouting and slowing the freight that used to move predictably. Consolidation in food processing, where 4 or 5 companies now control most of the meat, dairy, and grain handling in the country, has removed the redundancy that used to absorb shocks, and the regulatory environment, particularly around imports, labeling, and emissions, has added cost at every link in the chain. There is a historical parallel I keep coming back to. In 1973, the Soviet Union quietly bought up a substantial portion of the American wheat surplus through a series of separate contracts. Individually, they looked routine. By the time the USDA understood the scale of the purchase, domestic wheat prices had doubled. Bread prices had followed. Americans spent the next several years adjusting to a new normal that never fully reversed. The lesson was not that the Soviets were clever. The lesson was that the system had no early warning. The signal was distributed across 100 small transactions, and nobody was reading them together. That is what I think is happening now in slow motion across the Costco shelf. The signals are distributed, mainstream coverage handles them one at a time because each one alone is not a story. Together, they are the story. Number 9. The 9th item is honey, pure raw honey. The 3-pound jar of Kirkland Signature has moved from around $12 to nearly $20 in some warehouses. The USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service has been tracking honey production. American honey output has been in long-term decline, driven by colony collapse disorder, pesticide pressure, and habitat loss. The Food and Drug Administration has separately documented that a meaningful share of imported honey is adulterated with cheaper syrups. That means the real honey supply is even tighter than the labels suggest. Honey properly sealed never spoils. Archaeologists have eaten 3,000-year-old honey from Egyptian tombs. 3 jars in your pantry is a lifetime supply for sweetening, for medicinal use, for trade if you ever needed it. Number 10. The 10th item is over-the-counter medication. Specifically, the Kirkland Signature ibuprofen and acetaminophen multipacks, and the basic antihistamines. I started noticing thinner stock on these shelves in the spring. The FDA maintains a drug shortage database. The number of active shortages has been at or near record levels through 2024 and into 2025. The active pharmaceutical ingredients for most of these medications are manufactured overseas, primarily in India and China. The supply chain for them is thinner than most Americans realize. A single port disruption or a single regulatory action in either country can ripple through American pharmacy shelves within weeks. 2 bottles of each in a household cabinet, rotated by date, costs almost nothing and removes a category of worry. Pharmacists who work the retail counter have publicly described the pattern of intermittent unavailability. It does not make the news because it is too distributed to count as a single shortage. Number 11. The 11th item is shelf-stable milk. The boxed ultra-pasteurized milk that Costco sells by the case, sometimes under the Kirkland label, sometimes as Horizon Organic, has been moving faster off the shelf than I have ever seen. Members who lived through the early pandemic learned that fluid milk is fragile and that the boxed alternative is not. Shelf-stable milk holds for 6 to 9 months unopened at room temperature. 1 case in the pantry is a calm answer to a category of disruption that, if it happens, happens fast. I do not think mainstream food media talks about shelf-stable milk because it is unglamorous. Because the dairy industry prefers consumers to think of milk as a fresh product. The economics of long-life milk threaten the refrigerated supply chain that the major processors have built their margins on. Which brings me to the 12th item, the one I told you about at the start. Number 12, it is salt. Plain iodized table salt. The case of Morton or Kirkland that sits low on a shelf you have walked past every visit for years. I want you to understand why this item is the one that changed how I read the entire pattern. Salt is the cheapest thing in the warehouse. A 2 5-pound bag costs less than a fast food meal. It does not expire. It does not require any special storage beyond keeping it dry. and it is the single most important preservation tool human beings have ever discovered. Every civilization that survived a hard winter, a war, or a famine survived it on salt. The Roman army was partly paid in it. The word salary comes from it. The English word salad comes from the Roman practice of salting greens. For most of human history, controlling the salt supply was controlling the food supply. Here is what I noticed. The bulk salt section at 3 different Costco warehouses I visited this fall had been quietly reduced. Not eliminated, reduced. Less shelf-facing, fewer pallets, and the price, which has been almost unchanged for years, has started to move. The Salt Institute and USGS data on domestic salt production show that the United States imports a meaningful share of its food-grade salt, much of it from Mexico and Chile. Road salt demand from northern states is once again competing with food-grade processing capacity. A late 2024 winter event in either supplier country, combined with any port disruption, would draw down food-grade salt before most consumers noticed. But the real reason salt is the surprise item is this. If the other 11 items on this list become harder to find, salt is what lets you stretch what you have. Salt cures meat, salt preserves fish, salt ferments vegetables into food that lasts the winter. Salt makes butter last. Salt is the multiplier on every other item I just walked you through. 5 25-pound bags of plain, non-iodized salt in food-grade buckets, kept dry, is 125 pounds of preservation capacity that will outlive you. The cost is under $50. There is no item in the warehouse with a higher ratio of strategic value to retail price. None. When I realized that, I understood that the pattern I had been tracking was not just about scarcity, it was about resilience. The 11 items I walked you through are what you eat. The 12th item is what lets you keep eating when the 11 get harder to find. Mainstream coverage does not talk about salt because there's no advertiser whose margin depends on you buying more of it. It is too cheap to be a story, which is precisely why it is the story. So that is the dispatch. 12 items, 1 pattern, 1 quiet conclusion. I am not telling you the shelves are going to be empty next month. I am telling you that the slow tightening I have been watching is real. It is documented across USDA reports and FDA databases and university extension publications. The people in the supply chain have been describing it openly to anyone who reads industry trade press. The story is not hidden. It is just distributed across too many small signals for the news cycle to assemble. If you are the kind of person who would rather have the answer in your pantry than the question on your mind, you already know what to do this week. I want to hear from you on one specific thing. Of the 12 items I walked you through, which one have you personally noticed shifting in your local warehouse? Price, packaging, availability, anything. Leave it below. I read them. The picture gets clearer when more of us are looking at the same shelf. If this is the kind of dispatch you want more of, subscribe and stay close. The next one I am working on is about a category of product that is not on any shortage list yet, but 3 separate retailers have quietly started reordering at half the volume they did last year. I will tell you what it is when I have walked the aisle myself. Until then, keep your eyes on the small things. That is where the story always starts.